Today on Giant Travels by Van, I'll show you how to build a one-of-a-kind Shou Sugi Ban ceiling. Welcome back to Giant Travels by Van. Shou Sugi Ban is an ancient Japanese method of wood preservation. When combined with staining, it creates very unique results. Today, I'll show you how to build a ceiling, or you could apply the technique to walls within your van, and I'll also use it to create a tabletop. Let's get started. Like many others, I like the look of a tongue and groove ceiling in the van, and they're very popular because you can finish them natural or painted, and they get that nice unique look with the tongue and groove running the length of the van. However, most of the people I saw putting it up were really complaining about the fact that they had to put so many sheet metal screws in, one for each board, and build it across the ceiling. So I think I found a much easier, better, stronger, and quicker way to install with less hardware in the final analysis, so that you have a cleaner looking roof when it's done. What I did was bought a piece of plywood. I think I used Lagun here, and I took and ripped it to just under a 21-inch width, which if you're using the Home Depot 3.5-inch wide tongue and groove, you'll find that that would be 6 boards joined together will make about a 21-inch width. So what I did was take these and glue them down onto that plywood 2 at a time, and clamp them down for it to sit. You can see the glue ready here for the next 2 boards. I would measure off the area so that I knew where to apply the glue, and then slide the 2 boards, which were already joined together in the area next to the glue, over and join them into the existing boards, and then clamp it all down. This works well in several ways. It gives you a much larger piece that you'll be able to install to the ceiling as a 21-inch and full length of the van, rather than individual boards reaching up over your head and trying to install them. And again, it allows, because it's stronger unified assembly with these all glued together, you'll be able to use less hardware. Since I'm using riv nuts for everything I do in the van, then I only needed a couple of riv nuts at each rib to be able to attach this to the ceiling the way I wanted. So here's a completed assembly that's 21 inches wide. Again, all 6 of these boards are glued down onto the sheet of plywood, and then I can cut this to the shape I need and mount it as a single unified assembly up on the ceiling after I do my finish. I think I may be the first to have tried this, but I'd run across Shou Sugi Ban as a technique on YouTube, where they burn the wood and then apply stain to it to get this interesting effect. And I wanted to try that for the ceiling. So this may possibly be the first Shou Sugi Ban ceiling in a van that's tongue and groove. So here's a test showing the equipment. It's just a simple $20 weed burner from Harbor Freight and a tank of propane. And then you take your boards and burn them. Try and get a uniform amount of burning. Here I did 2 different test boards with varying amounts of burning. I wanted to see how the stain would look on 2 different test boards. Whenever you're doing woodworking, it's always good to do a test piece using the type of wood that you're using and the type of finish techniques that you're going to use, so you'll know exactly what you'll get on the back end instead of kind of guessing and hoping it'll turn out right. So these 2 test boards would allow me to apply the stain and see what kind of finish I would get with those varying amounts of burn into the wood. So here you see the 3 test pieces I did. The one on the right is a piece of the tongue and groove in original untouched format. It wasn't burned, and it just has the natural aqua stain applied to it that I'd purchased. Then the other 2 are the boards that you saw in the previous image, where they were both burned to varying degrees. And what I did is only apply the stain above the burn away, so you could see the burn amount and then see the stain having its effect on it. So here's a closer look at the 3 boards, and you can see that what the Shou Sugi Ban burning does is kind of reject the stain soaking in wherever the burn is its deepest. So the more that you burn the board, the less stain color that you're going to get in it. Because it's easy for this technique to create a pretty dark surface, I decided that when I created mine, I would try and do among the lightest burning that I possibly could from the boards, and that would keep the ceiling as light as possible to keep the van brighter inside. I also found that the colors kind of nicely matched the van colors that I was trying to strive for, and just for fun I'd ordered a couple pillows online with my van logo embedded into them. These were pretty inexpensive and kind of fun to have in the van. So here's an image of me burning the wood. I did this at night, so you can kind of see the flames really well coming off of it. And again, these were the assembled pieces, and you can see there's a hole cut out for the light fixture that's going to be installed. If you watch some of the videos on YouTube showing how Shou Sugi Ban's done by various people, you'll find that they use various tools from metal brushes down to plastic brushes to kind of brush off any loose material from the burn if you do get any charcoal or anything. I found that with the lighter range of burning that I was doing on the wood, that a quick brush with a plastic bristled brush was enough to just prepare it for stain. Here's the first piece fully stained and ready for polyurethane to seal it. It went on pretty easy. I did a couple of boards at a time and just wipe on the stain, let it sit there for a minute, and try and pull it off in the same order that you put it on so that it's all sat uniformly on the boards about the same amount of time. To seal in the finish, I wanted to use a water-based polyurethane, and I applied a trick that I've come up with some years ago. I found that most people just open the can and use a brush and try and go back and forth from the can to the material, spreading drops everywhere. So it's much easier, I found, if you just purchase an inexpensive ketchup bottle and pour it full of the mixed polyurethane, and then you can just squeeze it out into the area that you need to apply it, brush it on pretty quickly, and overall this is almost twice as fast as trying to deal with it coming out of a can. And you also get a little longer work time before it starts setting up because you're squirting it directly out and ready to brush it immediately. This is a really great way to put this finish on. If those hands don't look too manly, they're actually my daughter's. I got her to do this, so she cut her teeth on finishing by doing both the staining and the sealing of the wood for me. So here's the finished product with a light fixture installed in it. The photograph really doesn't do it justice. In person, this has a sheen to it, something akin to what you'd see on the scales of a fish. It's kind of hard to describe, but it really comes out beautiful. Here's the first panel installed in the ceiling, and as you can see, there's only a couple of fasteners at each rib. Again, these are rib nuts that I just positioned and drilled in to hold the entire panel up. Because I had created the overhead storage area above the cockpit of the vehicle, I would not be able to reach the frontmost rib in the ceiling, and so to support the front end of the ceiling, I bolted these thin pieces of metal from Home Depot onto each section of wood so that this would slide over the board that was holding my speakers in that assembly. So if you look at this ceiling panel here right above the speaker, you'll see the 4 screw heads that are holding the 2 metal plates that are supporting this front area. And so the assembly is the 3/4 inch polyiso board was slid over the board with the speakers purposely so that I could extend the insulation as far forward as I could to the rib. But then the ceiling's held in place by those metal pieces, just compression wedged in there between the white board that holds the speakers and the polyiso board. The fit was really solid, it worked really well, and I didn't need to have any additional fasteners or spend any time doing any fastening inside the van. Just attach those and then slide them in, and then fasten the rib nuts to hold the 2 rib support areas up. Here's a view towards the other side of the van, and you can see that I use these trim washers for the bolts, so that makes it look nice where they come through the ceiling there. Because of the 21-inch width of this first panel that I'm putting up, you can see I just had to cut out about 1.5 inch clearance for the vent to be able to come through and be able to mount the trim ring for the vent onto the ceiling. I also wanted to test the lights before finishing the ceiling to make sure that they were good, so I just quickly wired up the 2 lights to 12 volt and made sure that they were working. Because of my cabinetry that went all the way to the ceiling, 2 sections of this 20-inch wide tongue and groove and plywood assembly reached all across the width of the van except for this small section here by the door. So some careful measuring yielded this piece that would fit in and close off that final area. So here's a view of the entire finished ceiling with the 3 lights in place. My lighting plan was to have a light at the door for when you're coming in, a light at the front right speaker, you can see there, so that it would light over the refrigerator that's going to be installed below there, and then the light here by the vent that would be for when sitting in the rear of the van. So here's just some other views of the ceiling from different angles. Again, really a photograph doesn't do justice to the kind of shimmer and sheen that you get from Shou Sugi Ban. There's just something about the charcoaling of the wood and putting the stain over it and finishing it that produces a really unique finish, and it becomes one of a kind then. You can also see that I've mounted the trim ring for the ceiling vent to finish that off. Again, this kind of ceiling with the assembly on plywood with the tongue and groove boards before assembling it allows for a much reduced number of fasteners to hold up to the ceiling, as you can see in these photographs. I think that this technique of mounting the tongue and groove boards 6 at a time to a plywood backer yields a much better way to do it, and would also work equally well for someone who wanted to do tongue and groove on their walls, or I thought of even within someone's home, you could do this as wainscoting and create a really unique look within the home. I next turned my attention to some curtains that I wanted to mount in it. I found kind of a matching color in some blackout curtains from Walmart, and my daughter cut them and hemmed them to length and width that I wanted. And then I used the same metal that I'd used for the back cloth upholstery covering that I'd put on by cutting a metal threshold strip in half lengthwise to be able to fasten the curtains to that front wall that you see here. To hold the curtains closed, I came up with these hooks that mounted above my latches for the drop-down shelf. They worked out well. They stayed out of the way, and all I had to do was put a grommet into the curtain using a grommet kit from Harbor Freight, and then you could hang the curtains crisscrossed, overlapped one over the other onto these hooks. You can see that the curtain just falls to the floor here behind the vehicle seats. And I had originally thought that I would fasten these on the sideboards that I'd put in using Velcro, but I wound up not doing that and letting them just hang to see how that would work. And since I've already been using the van, I found that I kind of prefer leaving them open like this. It lets some air flow if you leave the front windows down in the vehicle a little bit, so that you can turn on the roof vent and pull air in through past the curtains into the back area. So here's the completed curtains. I was pretty happy with how they came out. The overlapping makes sure that there's no light that will come into the back, and yet it allows my drop-down storage area to easily be accessed and hinge down to get into that storage place. Turning my attention to the floor, I first needed to fasten these sideboards at each door to the subfloor before I was ready to install my laminate floor. So I put a couple of screws countersunk down into those. Again, these were done in an earlier episode when I assembled the subfloor. I didn't take a lot of photographs during the installation of the floor. There's lots of videos that you can find on installing laminate wood floors. Simply measure, lock each piece in, make sure that the seams don't line up as much as possible. And when I was done, then I was able to finally mount the supports for my bed, and also put these aluminum trim edges in so that if you kick it when getting in or out of the van, you're not going to be chipping up the laminate floor. I went with a couple of these inexpensive mats from Walmart. I like the fact that they were waterproof, so that if you were on a rainy day, you could set your shoes there and let them dry out without chance of soaking through to the wood floor. Across the back door, because of the curvature, you have to make several relief cuts so that you can bend this aluminum guard to fit that shape. So I simply looked at the sections of it where it was seemingly straight, and then at each point that I needed to make a bend, I marked in the aluminum and then cut a relief notch in it so that it would bend. Having been really happy with the Shou Sugi Ban ceiling, I tried my hand at doing a Shou Sugi Ban table surface for my Lagun table mount. This was designed to be just big enough to put my laptop with a mouse beside it on it and work comfortably. That surface, big enough for a laptop, was still small enough that it would allow me to swing it all the way forward here so that I could exit to the back of the van, or, as you see here, swing it towards the back in front of the cabinets here so that I could exit towards the front of the van. And this was accomplished by a notch that, if you look closely down in here, allowed access for the lever that tightens the Lagun table to have some clearance to pass into this area so that you could swing the table back far enough. That's why the front of my cabinets in the earlier episode where I built those has a little bit of a unique shape in this area. I needed to accommodate both the latch that you see at the top that holds the drawer closed securely, but also this opening for this handle to pass into when you rotate the table towards the back of the van. I wanted to be able to mount the table when I was traveling, and so I came up with this idea that standing it upright and fastening it to my cabinet would work well. So I just drilled a hole where I knew I could have clearance inside the cabinet and used a long bolt and a wing nut, and just simply mounts the entire tabletop surface to the cabinetry with one bolt since it's sitting on the floor. I just used some of the shelf liner material to protect and pad it so that it wouldn't get scratched, and then just tightened the levers on the arm so that it doesn't rotate, and again it's sitting on a mat on the floor. To hold my refrigerator in place, I just built a couple of simple corner brackets, corner braces that were at the front of it, since I'm worried about stopping the vehicle and not having the refrigerator slide forward. And then towards the back of it, which you can't really see here, is just a strip of 3/4 inch wood that keeps it from sliding backwards, that was just short, probably 1 inch tall, screwed down to the floor. These were fastened through the laminate floor and into the plywood subfloor using pocket screws, which you don't see here because the holes for those were drilled on the inside, on the refrigerator side of these brackets. There were 2 on each side of the bracket drilled down to put the pocket screws through. All right, thanks for watching. With Shou Sugi Ban, the possibilities are almost endless between different types of wood, different amounts of burning, and different colors of stain. I hope you'll try it and create a one-of-a-kind creation for your van also. Stay tuned. In my next episode, I'll cover my wiring and lighting and wrap up my van build. Thanks for watching. All right, thanks for watching. With